So, like the slide says, my name is Kamala Schlad. I'm an architect in the engineering team. What I'm going to cover today is pretty much our inside architecture and some roadmap, some future items. So this first slide gives you kind of a view into our virtual appliance.
Just
Can you hear
a
me
little
now?
louder, please.
Okay.
Yeah, the microphones
the mic,
don't do
I mean
amplification,
your
it's just
voice.
recording.
Yeah, so clip it, otherwise you'll get it. Just clip it and you just speak
Okay.
louder is what they want you to do. Otherwise,
The mic is not PA, the mic is just recording.
Yeah.
Okay. This is a cross-section into our virtual appliance. Everything's bundled in. There's no external databases, no external pieces of software. Like Ed mentioned before, it's a virtual appliance. You just deploy it, 50 minutes, you're up and running. This gives you a good cross-section. At the base layer, we have Linux OS, it's CentOS, nothing special there. And then on top of that, we build ECX Layer 1 services. This is your popular, best-of-breed open source components. We don't want to rebuild something that's already out there. Some important stuff here. We cover job scheduling, reporting, directory services. But some important thing is, all our architecture is based on Apache, Virgo, Apache Spring, Java development. So it's very modular. Easy for us to add enhancements. Another important thing is in NoSQL database, we have MongoDB. Obviously, we can catalog billions of objects, and with MongoDB, we have the ability to scale that out, shard the data. So it has really good scale-out characteristics. On top of these open source services, we built our own proprietary management services. That's layer 2. So here, we have accounting, policy management, job management, cataloging. Important one here is resource provider. So we have these different resource providers for hypervisor, storage. So we can easily go ahead and plug in new storage. So when we want to support EMC or HP storage or IBM storage, we can go ahead and easily add that. So on top of these proprietary management services, we built out the ECX Layer 3, which is what we expose to the user. We have the NetApp catalog, the VM catalog, the VM copy data, and the NetApp copy data. On top of these services, one thing that's very important is it's all RESTable. Everything is controlled through a REST API. Even our GUI, the only way it communicates with ECX is through a REST API. So MSPs can easily extend our platform or integrate into other platforms, DevOps, etc. So, and just to show you a little animation here. Future, we're going to add SMIS capability so we can cover more storage platforms, such as EMC is one example. We can add new services or reports pretty easily. Any questions so far in the architecture here?
As far as future EMC plans, is there 1 or 9 particular arrays you're going to start with initially?
Yeah, so right now we're deciding that. We're probably looking at VMAX first. That seems to be the sweet spot in terms of VMware high-end shops.
Sure. And you'll tag in integration, SRD, blah, 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 all the underlying stuff, and then have to redo it as a completely new effort for the next product, because it's like a new company.
Yeah.
Well,
and also there are some shortcuts, like Viper has potential, but that's up and down.
Yes, valid.
And IBM has one that goes across, right? So there's other ways to do it. They all use some SMIS and API, so there's some shortcuts.
Sure.
But you're right. If you build a provider, every API and rules engine, so what it can do, we need to kind of catalog, right? So if we can get there easy, we'll take some shortcuts, but you're correct. We build a provider per.
Yeah, I'll kind of go into how we're going to tackle that.
Sounds good.
So this slide is, just what I talked about before. We have the storage provider. Right now we cover ONTAP and CDOT. We have, future storage providers. We want to plug in compute provider. We have VM right now. We're going to add Hyper-V this year, and possibly next year OpenStack. And then we have LDAP integration.
It's also already running in Amazon. It's not a production box, but it's a test drive you can go to. So did that port in 36 hours, but it's not production. You'll see that in the next couple quarters. But
Yeah, so when we say ONTAP, that covers Cloud ONTAP also. If you're running in AWS, you can go ahead and replicate to Amazon. So this is how we deploy right now for a GA product. It's a single appliance, everything's built in, the database, all the services within one virtual appliance. No need to set up anything external. So the next step here, this is our future. This is how we're going to scale out and have fault tolerance. So I know Ed mentioned Docker here. So we're going to take our, I guess you could call it microservices, like the REST API, the policy, the persistent, and break them out into different Docker images. And now you can actually set up nodes, and everything will work as one cohesive unit. There's no need for masters and masters anymore. So unique thing here is we have a message bus that we can actually communicate communicate the separate Docker microservices with. So one thing we're trying to avoid from past legacy architectures is avoid masters of masters. Scale out, not scale up.
Can the cluster span VMware clusters and things of that nature, or does it have to be within one cluster? Or?
It's all, so we're communicating through RabbitMQ between the microservices, so it's all IP based. They can reside on different VMware servers.
So when you say ESX Docker host, will it be instantiated as a Docker instance, whether you're putting on a physical host or whether you're running it as Docker within VMware as a VM?
Yeah, as long as a container, whether physical or virtual, can run Docker, we don't care.
Okay.
We've had requests for physical just because of day one.
Absolutely,
so
absolutely.
That's the other thing that gets us. But I'm just saying, he talked about it. So this is going to be, we're being clear, this is not GA. This is what's going to come next quarter.
Sure.
But it's very interesting. You're able to shard this out, the database in the back end. You do that for objects, but you can also shard out the front end to do file indexing. If you just do the high level objects and doing the orchestration, you don't scale out the front end as much, but you're doing some deep dive and you're doing the file analytics on a whole bunch of environments, you scale it out. The key thing is because of the REST and the way Docker works, one GUI, you get to see the whole thing regardless if it's 18 systems underneath. Mm-hmm. So it actually is a pretty powerful implementation.
And if you go the physical approach, it does give you that resiliency in the event that you're not protecting your storage from your storage, having all your data reside in the same storage, so when it fails, you fail.
Right. Multiple locations.
Potentially.
No, exactly. That's exactly what we're doing.
Yeah. And the important thing about this architecture is we have a message bus. Even though right now we ship as one big bundle, we can separate out the microservices, scale out. Mm-hmm. So I just want to bring up RBAC really quick. Right now we have for the GA version, we have a simple RBAC where basically we have an administrator that can do everything, or we have a view user that can view reports, do searches, but can't actually control policy. But this is on our roadmap for this year, is allow granular access to individual items. And we think the use cases are going to be, hey, you have a storage admin that wants to do certain things, that owns certain items. You have application owners who maybe you don't want them to set up policies, do snapshots, but you want them to do the dev tests. So you Oracle admins, you don't want them to set up a snapshot schedule, but you want them to be able to spin up a dev test version of the Oracle database. And maybe you want them to only have access to the replica and not the primary storage, so you don't affect production at all. Then you have the developers. We have rich REST API. We have examples, etc. So it's very easy to use. It's JSON based. And then you may have operators where you only want to give them access to reports, queries, etc. Again, we'll get granular in terms of, hey, what VMs you want to access, which volumes you want to access, etc., or even which copies. So does that kind of answer the RBAC questions? I know somebody had a question before on that. So.
I was curious, as other people are commenting on the curiosity of that, was it intentionally called ECX because we also have to deal with ESX? And will there be an ESXi? Okay. ECXi?
Enterprise catalog is how it started. Yeah. We don't break that out, so it wasn't connected, but sorry about the confusion.
So it's not the Elastic catalog.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's...
We don't break it out, but...
I think we have a spot for you in marketing.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to kind of go over how the copy data management actually works. So right now we can take your copy data from any source, So right now we support, from your primary snapshots, if your VMware is sitting on, NetApp storage, our plan this year to add from any storage. So we'll actually do a VMware CBT backup from any storage, DAS, whatever you have, and move it over onto an advanced storage system like a NetApp or EMC, where you can go ahead and leverage these advanced copy data management workflows. So now you can basically cover anything that's sitting on your primary storage or anything sitting on cheap storage. Or you may even want to move over from cheap storage when you're in development, move it over to production.
So you're going to support your own data mover? Is that how I read this?
Yes. So we actually have the code already from our DPX product. We support VMware, VDP, CBT backup. So we're just going to plug it into ECX. Now you can actually, leverage your advanced storage system and cover fringe cases where you might not have everything on your primary data. Yeah.
This is around the corner. So this is if you don't have your storage on snapshots that a platform we support, you can now bring it in the form of a classic backup, a very efficient backup that you can do restores, but you can also do copy data management once it's on the platform. So just to make sure we kind of switch topics a little bit, this is a different use case.
Now, to that, tying into the potential use cases and the any storage model, is there like a EMC, when you go the EMC road, vPlex integration, which then ties into any storage except for NetApp. Block, technically. But is that part of the integration strategy is to then orchestrate and integrate with vPlex and its ability to, which is just going to throw some extra
just like
pain on the fire, I mean.
Just like SVC, same thing, right? So we'll do that and manage below NetApp is there.
If you get a full plate.
Well, because of the snapshot in the manager of this, SMIS does a really good job of it. Not all platforms, especially new ones, aren't. So it does a really good job of it. Mm-hmm. Now, managing the advanced storage system would be our provider. So this would be where we'd put, VMAX, vPlex, and other things. What Cam was just teeing up is a second use case, which is it's coming in, in the next 2 quarters. But basically, no matter what we add here, so vPlex, SVC, whatnot, you can copy data management here. There's a different use case we're saying. Now, in addition to that, you're going to have some things on VMware environments that are off your primary, or you want to do a classic backup, and this is doing, it's basically change block level and doing a backup onto whatever platforms we support. Once you do a provider for that platform, it would be there. Does that make sense? So
yeah.
I just want to make sure
I'm looking 6 to 12 quarters out, so I'm just trying to see what the future resides.
That will be integrated. Once we integrate like an SVC, we're closer on the SVC side, so it'd be the same concept. You'd pick up all those things.
Yeah, and the key difference between Veeam and those other guys is we're actually going to be, the target systems, we're going to store the backup in native format. It's not going to be in a backup format. So you can leverage it instantly.
Better performance, possibly lower efficiency.
But the copy data reuse, you need the native format.
Yeah.
So that you get all that reuse, right?
Yeah, because the rehydration penalty can eat you alive.
Is E-Series and FlashArray supporting this? I mean, there was 7-mode, CDOT, and Cloud on tap.
Those are the 3 providers. We don't do E-Series yet. They have the Edge product and other ways to do that. And what was the other one? The FlashArray.
FlashArray, yeah.
That's a future. It's a derivative. So it's on the roadmap.
That was a question from the community.
Yeah. So does your software support this hardware that doesn't ship yet?
Well, we're waiting for the FlashArray. I think that'll be a good box, but we're waiting for it.
So we want to do everything agentlessly. It's automated workflow. We capture all the VMs. It's app consistent. We'll handle the replication. We kind of went over that in the demo. We auto provision the targets. The relationships are all set up. Again, the source can be primary storage snapshot in the future, CBT. Again, we orchestrate the entire workflow. Let's say if your VMware snapshot fails, we're not going to do the replication, right? So it's one unit. So this way, we know we have a consistent snapshot, and it's consistent on the replicas also. So this is our use workflow works. We can go ahead and reuse from any replica, whether it's your primary, secondary. We keep track of everything in the catalog. The most important thing is instant. It's stored as native format. So the first thing we do is, we'll go ahead from our catalog, figure out where the actual VMs are sitting, which volumes. We'll go ahead and clone those. We'll go ahead and mount those on your VMware servers, depending on which location you are at. We're site-based. So wherever your copy is, we'll mount it to the closest ECX server. We'll support VMFS or NFS data stores. And again, there's no data movement. We call it instant virtualization. We'll create the VM envelope, including the number of CPUs, memory, etc., the network. It will mount the data store. Again, there's no data transfer. Once you're done with this test environment, you can go ahead, clean up. We'll go ahead and automatically clean up everything. Or you could do RRP, rapid return to production, where we'll go ahead and move the VM envelope back to its primary location, and in the background, use a vMotion to move the storage. So users can actually go ahead and keep using their application. So even if you have a 5 terabyte VM, it's going to take you 3 minutes. That's how long it takes for the VM to come up. So this is what we do.
So when an application is running and modifying data,
yep.
Well, how does the storage vMotion work in this situation? Because you've got different versions of the data being played with at this point in time.
Right. So let's say you want to put it back to production, right? So we'll go ahead and delete your production VM. Let's say it's down, it's in a bad state. We'll delete it from VM, where we'll go ahead and create a new envelope in its place with the same name, same configuration, same network, and we'll point the data store to the clone copy. So that brings it up right away. So all read-writes are going to that clone. It's a read-write clone when you create a flex clone, and it's similar on other arrays. You can create a read-write clone, and then the backend will issue a vMotion from the clone storage to your production storage. So obviously, your clone storage may not be as fast as your production storage, but pretty close. It might be on the same system if you're recovering from primary snapshot.
Can you put some parameters around the VM envelope, because that's a term that not a lot of people are familiar with? So
VM envelope is pretty much a VMware object within VMware itself. A particular VM, what storage it's attached to, which network it's attached to.
Cool. Thank you.
GPU memory.
So the IP addresses, all that stuff get re-IP'd, or how's it all work?
The IPs live within the virtual machine, technically, right?
Well, within the VMX file.
Yeah, so we won't go and change anything within that OS.
Not the VMX file.
Just VMware.
No,
inside the operating system.
The operating system.
Yeah.
Yes. So in order to change those, the IP addresses of the VMs, you really do need an agent.
And that's
because you got to push them in.
Workflow integration, WMI, whatever it happens to be. Yeah.
That makes
We're
sense.
just talking. Go ahead.
Don't mind us.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, we don't do anything inside the OS, but we stay at the hypervisor level.
Yep.
We have something.
And you'll change what VLANs can be attached to, so as not to cause that kind of conflict, and you can spin up this. If it's a package of virtual machines, that test bubble, as it used to kind of be, so a number of envelopes going inside of that environment to provide that support, that ability to test it out.
Right, so there's 2 modes in the test. You can say, hey, this is what I want for my test network, this is what I want for my production network.
Do you have to pre-stage your networks inside of, or is it stand up a network and then tear it down?
You have to pre-stage right now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But that's a small feature we could backlog. Yeah.
Actually, I prefer the pre-staging in some cases versus we stood it up and it didn't work and now it failed back down again. Thank you, SRM.
And you can actually pre-stage 2 networks, one for your test, one for your production. So let's say you're not sure if you're going to production yet. You'll go to test first, and there's a secondary option that says, this is my production network. So this is what we have currently. What we support in our GA product is basically VSS application support. So anything that supports VSS, like Exchange, Oracle, MS SQL, even Oracle on Windows, you'll get app consistent. And Prashant showed you in a demo where you can select that to be on or off.
Now, VSS to me means volume snapshot service, essentially, or the various terminology. But Oracle not running on Windows, VSS maybe means something else, or you mean maybe it's just a formatting, nomenclature, look, and layout thing. But otherwise, if you're saying Oracle or Oracle on Windows.
Yeah. So for the roadmap, I'll show you where we will support Oracle on non-Windows and more integration into that.
Sure. So this is Oracle Windows. Just on Windows only.
Okay. Yeah.
Because the VSS writer is so easy to write to.
Right.
And then it's everyone else that's...
So we waited to come in and have a full use case. So a set of storage, about 90% of the market is ONTAP family, and then VMware on top. And you'll see us going from there, but that's what's currently in GA. That was our first use case.
That's perfect. Thank you.
So this is what's on the roadmap. But one thing we want to do is have a deeper integration into the apps itself. We don't want to do agent. We'll go ahead and agentlessly inject code into the VM at runtime. So it's always updated. You don't have to go ahead and maintain patches, etc. We want the first phase is going to be transaction log management and log backup. It's pretty important. And some solutions today they do log truncation, but not log backup, especially when you talking at the hardware snapshot level. And we'll go into how we do that. We want to support Exchange, SharePoint, SQL, and Oracle. But let me take you through the workflow. We'll have what we're calling ECX app helper logic. We'll go ahead and inject into it. We'll do a VMware snapshot first, then our code will run. That'll quiesce the app, put the database in backup mode. Then we'll go ahead and do the VM snapshot. Then we'll do the hardware snapshot. Then after the hardware snapshot's done, we'll go ahead and delete the VMware snapshot. But then now we'll do a log backup. So in case of Oracle, we'll do an archive log backup. We'll go ahead and actually provision a new volume to write the logs to. So you don't need a separate backup product to manage your log files. After we do these single node applications, we also want to do more advanced applications that are multi-node, SharePoint farms, Oracle RAC, Exchange DAG, and be able to coordinate all the different nodes in terms of snapshot, hardware snapshots, and recovery. And we'll go over that. Any questions here so far as application integration? Next one. So this is just an example of how we do Oracle RAC copy data workflow. In Oracle RAC, you can have several nodes where your database is spread out. It's going to have shared storage. So it's very important that you coordinate the different nodes, make sure everything is put into backup mode before we actually do a hardware snapshot, or even so we want to make sure you put all the databases, all the nodes in backup mode. Then do the VMware and hardware snapshot. Make sure we archive the backup logs, archive the logs and back them up to a separate media. There'd be a new volume that we'd go ahead and auto provision. Capture all the Oracle configuration files, catalog all the artifacts in the ECX catalog itself, and then also provide some kind of syncing with RMAN catalog. So you can go ahead and do RMAN recoveries if you didn't want to use the GUI, and we would have pointers there to our archive log locations. So on the use data, this is where our power comes into play. We would orchestrate basically that entire Oracle RAC cluster. We'll make sure we'll bring up all the VMs. We'll bring back all the Oracle configuration files. We'll clone all the necessary data volumes and mount them to the correct VMs. We'll go ahead and mount the archive log locations, recover those. So now you can go ahead and replay, individual SCMs or a specific point in time. So that's kind of the end of our application support roadmap. Any questions there before I move on to something a little bit different in terms of how we're going to integrate multiple storage vendors? Go on. Okay, so this is a multi-vendor storage provider. Let's see if I have a slide there. Okay, so this is how we're going to attack basically supporting all these different arrays. We're going to have a multi-vendor storage provider model where we can go, we're going to start with an SMIS model, but SMIS may not be perfect for every vendor. Some vendors support it really well, some vendors don't. Like IBM support it really well. EMC depends on the array, and there's other array guys that don't even support SMIS or et cetera, but we want to use that SMIS as kind of a model. It covers most of the functionality we need to do, and anywhere where we don't have SMIS call, we'll go ahead and do a native API call. And again, this way, once we write a VMware or Hyper-V service control provider, we don't have to go and rewrite that. We just say, hey, call a snapshot, and then an underlying storage provider figure out how to do the snapshot or how to do the replication.
So can I just raise a point on that? I actually spent a lot of time with a company that developed a platform that extracted data from arrays and tried to normalize that data. And SMIS was a terrible interface to use, so we abandoned that because it never gave you the depth that we wanted to go down to in many cases.
Right.
Then when we went to the native side of things, we found that if we didn't have something that was like a REST API, that if we were trying to scrape from CLIs and so on, that every single version of things that were released ended up being slightly and subtly different. And that became a major and massive challenge to support. You've got a real issue trying to work out the right way to do that. And I don't envy the fact that you're going to try and do what we did in this particular product, and it is hard work. Just to give you an example, VNX, every single release of code of VNX, they shifted columns around, they extracted or
you have to parse the text
things in that weren't there. And that became really, really difficult to support and to ship out to clients. And this is a SaaS solution that the clients didn't even deploy themselves.
Right. Yeah. So I think if you look at SMIS, it started out really good maybe 5-10 years ago. Then vendors kind of didn't keep up, etc. But now Microsoft is actually bringing it back, because if you look at SCV, System Control Virtual Machine Manager, they're actually saying to their storage vendors, hey, you guys better support SMIS for snapshots and replication if you want us to drive Hyper-V through it. So there's actually storage vendors that say they don't officially support SMIS, but they have enough implementations for Hyper-V.
Be interesting to see how VASA 2.0 and 3.0 give you that kind of information as well.
Yeah. So I think
that might be a more appropriate way to get that out.
That's
Your VMware.
Because VASA 2.0 defines the snapshot and replication stuff.
That only helps you in a virtual environment. It doesn't help you in a physical.
Yeah, it only helps you in a
vSphere
vSphere 6 Plus environment. But that is where the world is going, right?
And once we get the vVols, it's going to become a little simpler, because vVols will actually do hardware snapshot for us. We don't have to do that. We just have to do the replication piece. So I think we're coming up with the same challenges. SMIS, we start off as a base, and then we may actually have to native REST APIs, or in extreme cases go to CLI. But that's life.
So can you just go back to that on that slide there?
Yeah.
You haven't really sort of explained how you would structure that data that you're extracting out for those multiple sources. And something I may have missed earlier on, so I'll just ask it very quickly. If I had a VM that was sitting on a NetApp box and it gets moved to an EMC box, which you support in both environments,
so
what happens then?
So I think our first version, you're probably going to set up different. So when you create a policy, you're going to say, hey, what's my data source going to be? Is it going to be NetApp or EMC? In that case, it's static. But we could see a future where we can automatically detect where it is and move it to a different policy.
Right.
So you probably want to set up, a NetApp policy, EMC policy, et cetera, for different storage targets. And even within EMC, depending on, who your cluster peers are, you want to set it up that way. So initially, it's going to be segregated by storage. That's probably the simplest way to do it.
Do you think that's a scalable design then, to fit environments that could scale to hundreds or thousands of VMs, where every time it was set up on a physical nature rather than setting it up?
No. So for short term, yes. For long term, we see it where you just set up one policy and we'll automatically detect which storage it's on, because we have that information.
Yeah. Right.
But I'm just being realistic in terms of our roadmaps.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely.